Is it okay for Christians to read other religious holy books?
Where America is in Bible prophecy.
Women becoming pastors and
Anointing homes and praying over homes.
Why would God have people tormented and burned for eternity?
What happened or where Jesus went after he died?
what is your opinion of what does the Bible say?
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. And now here's today's host, Brian Perez.
Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us today on Pastor's Perspective. And we've got a very special edition of the program today. In fact, we're not going to take any phone calls this hour, but it's Thursday. You know what that means. We're doing 2 hours today. So hold on to your questions. Call us back in 1 hour, 888-564-6173, the number to call. And today we've got a special guest in the studio who's also going to join us tomorrow. So if you have questions specifically for our guest, wait till tomorrow to call us with those. Hope those instructions didn't confuse you all too bad. In the studio today, we've got Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa here in Southern California. And Brian, who's our guest today?
Our guest is our dear friend Aaron Campbell from Philadelphia and from Antioch Church in West Philly. And it's great to see you.
Always good to be here with you.
Great to see you again. This isn't the first time you've been on the program.
No,
so.
yeah, it's fun every time.
It's been a while, but yeah, it's great to have Aaron out. So we were, trying to figure out something that we wanted to do some promotion for the book that we recently published with Aaron, the memoirs of his life experience up until this point. This is a book that I read a number of years ago and was so impacted and blessed. And, I tell people all the time, and somebody was just telling me the other day, it is an absolute page turner. It's one of those books that I couldn't put down. And I'm trying to think of who I was talking to a couple of days ago, and they were saying, yeah, my wife read it, and she couldn't even go to bed because she wanted to just keep reading the story. So it's an amazing story. Aaron, you pastor in West Philly. 20 years now you guys have
20
been?
years.
Yeah, pastoring. Tell us a little bit about Antioch. Tell us a little bit about the ministry.
Sure. Well, typical Calvary Chapel, right? Started in our living room with 3 people some 20 years ago. Just had a desire to really penetrate the belly of the beast, if you will, the core of the city. West Philly is right by downtown. It's just an extension of downtown Philly. And it was like our home became like a triage unit, where we had, Muslims in full garb coming to the house. We had people coming in that thought they were the 2 witnesses from the book of Revelation, heroin addicts literally taping their knuckles just so they wouldn't feel tempted to inject. And God was at work. And we were just doing the verse-by-verse teaching, and God exploded it. We've always been very outreach-oriented. Started frying fish on street corners when there were just 10 of us. We weren't holding Sunday services yet, but we said, God, we're going to be the most passionate word-sharing Bible study if we never become a church. But God expanded, miraculously gave us a building in the middle of the city on one of the major arteries. And to this day, 20 years later, we're still doing what we began doing, and you've been out, and people love you in Philly. So you've got a lot of people in Philly that love you and love your heart for ministry.
Yeah, and there's so many. Just in what he said, there are a bunch of like sub stories. We got a building, and there's a whole story behind the building and how they got the building. That's amazing, a miraculous story. But Aaron, what I wanted to do today is I wanted to just kind of go on a journey together. And just in some ways walk a little bit through the book. We want to encourage people to pick up the book, to read it. But I thought maybe, we could give an overview, give a little bit of a taste for what folks are going to get into if they do pick up the book. So the book is entitled Eyes That Seen Plenty. And you can get that at Amazon. You can go right into Amazon right now, type it in. And not only is there the book, there is also a book on tape, right? You sat in the studio here some months ago.
Did the audiobook.
And you did the audiobook. Yeah, that's what
So on Audible, and Apple Music.
Right. Okay.
And
now,
it's on Kindle, too, for people who
And
just
on
wanna-
Kindle,
yeah,
yes,
Yeah.
for e-readers.
Yeah.
now, is there a hardback version too?
There is a hardcover
There's a
as well.
hardcover,
So
yeah.
we just wanted to lay it out in just every way. So
Yeah.
Now, before we start talking about the book, I want to make something clear. There's two, like you said, Brian, you read this book a number of years ago.
Yeah.
The older version is still online, so we want to make sure people get the correct version, the
Right. So-
up-to-date version.
great point. So this one says updated and expanded. And I mean, I just want to give just a shout out to my graphic artist, Jude Gavin. This cover is just so cool that the purchaser will be drawn to this cover anyway.
Yeah.
But it does say updated and expanded
Yeah.
to differentiate.
So if you see the one with the uncool cover, don't get that one. Yeah, get the other
The
one.
less cool cover.
Yeah.
The other cover was cool too, but this one is cooler. And not only is the
And I
cover,
can say that because he made the other one too, so no one's getting offended.
Yeah.
and not only is the cover cool, the back cover is super cool because it's got pictures of you as a kid and as a young man. It's got a picture of your beautiful wife here that I can see. And I mean, just looking at those pictures kind of tells a story in and of itself. So I love it. So, all right. So why don't we, why don't we just take a little walk here? Because, your story is fascinating from the beginning. And so I want to clarify for our audience, maybe those who aren't watching online. Aaron is African American and Native American. So you have this interesting mixed race situation that you have experienced growing up in your life. And God has seen fit to use you in both communities, which is really a beautiful thing. I think a lot of times, I mean, obviously the race issue in regard to African Americans is sort of front and center in the culture today, but we don't always hear a lot about Native Americans, and there's some real issues
Definitely.
regarding Native Americans as well. Yeah, so why don't we just, I mean, obviously we don't want to get into too much detail because we don't want to give the book away totally, but kind of just let's start out as, kind of some of your experiences as a kid growing up. You grew up in New Jersey, grew up in a rough part of town. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'll start by saying that this book is my testimony.
Yeah.
It's my testimony of how I came to Christ. And I just want to share that moments like these just makes me glad to be alive because I should be dead, But I also want to share that there's no such thing as a big testimony or a small testimony. Anytime a rebel bows the knee to our Lord, that is a miracle and that is a big deal. So, but this is my testimony. And like you said, coming back to my childhood, I'm from the North Jersey, New York City area. I'm born in 1974, so I'm an 80s baby. And the 80s were an interesting time. For one, the melting pot, the multiculturalism we hear about today, you didn't have that back then. It was very black and white. Even our celebration today in recognition of Latino culture was really not a phenomenon, especially in your North Jersey, New York City area. So you were either black or white. So here I am growing up biracial, and in my neighborhood, I was called white, but yet I went to one of the top private schools in New Jersey, which my father, even though I grew up, in a single parent home since I was age 4, my father did pay. They were both parents big on education. So I lived in a tough neighborhood, once a nice city, but the advent of crack cocaine quickly turned the city. It's just an extension of Newark, New Jersey. But in school, in one of these elite private schools, I'm black and, of course, the derogatory word that would come with it. And I enjoyed both worlds, but it's really a coming-of-age story. It is a story of a search for manhood, meaning, and identity. But in that search for manhood, meaning, and identity, it will take you across issues with class, issues with race, from someone who really lived in two different worlds. And interestingly, I learned about classism before I learned about racism. And it's even interesting that to a degree, classism is actually a more fitting word for some of what we even see today.
Yes.
Sometimes racism gets slapped on everything,
Yep.
and a lot of it is classism. And this book even gets into that through my own experiences. So
Just break that down for a minute, though. What do you see as the distinction between classism and racism, and what is oftentimes labeled racism today that is actually, in your perspective classism?
So here's a story in my book where my school, Wardlaw Hartridge, which still is around today, it was part of a conference, Princeton Day School, Newark Academy, Dwight Englewood. But Wardlaw Hartridge was the only elite prep school that was on the edge of a rough city, which was Plainfield. The others were in just suburbs tucked away. So here I am in school, but I'm a neighborhood kid. Everyone else gets picked up in the Jaguars and the Benzes, but I walk home as a latchkey kid as my mom's working one job and even two jobs. Well, my neighborhood friends would cut through the campus to get to the rough public school. And I would notice at 7 and 8 years old how my teachers would react as they come walking through. And here they are. They're just loving to see the Corvettes and the Porsches. And you could smell cookies coming from our, kitchen. And what kid wouldn't walk through and want that? But the teachers would look at them, and it was very much, and I start noticing that this isn't a race thing because I'm here and these teachers are very loving toward me. This is actually class.
So were the teachers black also, or?
At this elite school, no,
Yeah.
the teachers were 99%, really 99% white. And that's just where in my mind it's like, this is class, and then I write in the story how, as they're saying to the rest of the class, hey, turn back to your assignment, don't mind those kids, because the neighborhood kids could actually pick up on the fact that they're being viewed with contempt, which made them resentful.
Yeah.
So they went from sheepish kids walking through to kids that are acting out because they can feel the rejection, and you could see which would make the teachers just suck their teeth even more. And it was really this downward spiral that was really a class thing. And I get into the book of how little does my teacher know that I'm one of those kids.
Right.
All of us have no washer machine. All of us get our clothes washed at the same laundromat, carrying them in the same hefty bags, paying our electricity bill at the same building when our electricity goes off. And I was saying in the book, I learned about classism before I even learned about racism, though I would learn about racism as well. So that's just one instance.
Yeah.
So can you give us a current example of where you see classism? Because I mean, this is something that I don't think many people talk about classism or don't even recognize that there is somewhat of a class system here. Now, you guys know I lived in Britain for some years, and it is crystal clear in Britain. The class system is intact. It's been intact for centuries, and it's not even a color issue. It's just basically like these people live in those projects, and they stay in that part of the community. And then these people live in, this beautiful neighborhood and all that. So it's very much alive and well there. But do you see it anywhere today?
And I'm glad
in the
you brought
US?
that point up.
I was
And
going
of
to say, I've
course-
heard it described as elitism also. Would you say that's the same thing, or is that different?
I think elitism would only put a certain socioeconomic group as quote unquote guilty of such.
Okay.
I think when you say classism, it can be all different socioeconomic groups holding against whom they deem to be lower than, if you will. Does that make sense? I would say Philadelphia is interesting because Philadelphia, you have that classism. And interesting now is we're starting to see, even with poverty, I remember in the 80s, very black and white, seeing white families in an all-black neighborhood, you would not see that. And it would be just not a good situation across the board, Everyone still kind of stayed away from each other. In Philadelphia, poverty is really just this poverty has no prejudices. And as you're seeing poverty increase, Philadelphia itself is actually the poorest of the 10 largest cities in America. So what you're seeing now is you are seeing people of all races in all different neighborhoods of Philly. There's not tension between them because they're all in this plane of this. We're all surviving. And you're starting to see classism play out for those that really look behind the curtain and just put on their sociological lenses. This is classism playing out, whether it's calling them this group or calling this group, PWT. But so in Philadelphia, you are seeing a strong, because there are entirely white hoods in Philadelphia. Some rough white hoods in Philadelphia, just as rough as a hood that's the Latin hood or an African-American hood. So I would say Philadelphia, and especially right now with gentrification, Philly is definitely displaying strong classism in a lot of ways, similar to a Britain. It's just that no one's really using that that language has not yet. It's not where it needs to be. People, yes, there's a discussion to be had on race, but there's another discussion on class, and people need to learn to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, yeah. I spent some time with Aaron in Philly a while back, and wow, it was really an interesting experience. Because you've got all this amazing American history there. You've got the Liberty Bell, right there in the center of town, the Declaration of Independence signed there. You had all of that stuff. And then you got these surrounding neighborhoods. And Aaron took me to one neighborhood that was, I mean, honestly, it was like I've been to different third world countries, and I thought, this is equally as bad as anything I've seen in the third world.
Wow.
And I turned to you at one point and I thought, man, who would ever believe this is America? This is just unbelievable. And, we can go not too far from where we are, Brian.
Right.
We can find, similar, we can go to L.A., we can find, Skid Row, places like that. But this was even like a level above that. I was shocked at how, just radically dysfunctional the whole community. Kensington, right?
Kensington,
Yeah.
which is an Irish hood. But of course, now it being the heroin capital of America, it draws
Really?
people from all over.
Wow.
But it's got a very strong Irish backbone still. So very interesting. So,
Man, all that stuff just reminds us about how great the mission is. Gosh, the world needs Jesus. So you're growing up in these kinds of atmospheres, but like you said, you've kind of got these two worlds. You got your world at home with your mom and your brother in the hood, and then you're off to this this school that no one looks like you, no one lives anywhere, no one even knows where you live. And you got this this thing going in this elite private school, but then that's your younger years. So then you keep traveling the academic road because obviously you're in that school because you've got some brains. So that's going to take you. Ultimately, it's going to take you to the University of Pennsylvania. Correct?
yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So just kind of a quick journey to UPenn, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that happened there.
Okay. So I'm growing up in two different worlds. And mind you, I still have best friends from both worlds to this day. Brian, who's there's a chapter about his bar mitzvah in my book. He and I still bet Chinese food or sushi on a Big Ten basketball game. So I'm still great friends. So because I was at this school from age 6, it's kind of like learning to be bilingual at a young age. So I knew both worlds, but the worlds definitely, there was tension. And there's times I wanted to just be in the suburbs and I wanted bliss. And it's kind of like if my neighborhood doesn't, because I'm in private school, I'm a little bit behind on the jokes. I'm a little bit behind on who's the biggest drug dealer. If I'm one step behind, never mind. I'll just go and be white. I'll just go there. And there's a chapter of the book called I'm a White Boy. Then hip hop, very much in the evolution of hip hop, is in the story. And then hip hop went through a very nationalistic knowledge of self movement. And, then it's all about learning history and relearning history. And then it's kind of well, no, I'm not white. And, hip hop became almost like the I Am Somebody movement of the civil rights era for young people in the 80s. And the book walks through that. So then it's well, no, I'm not white. I'm going back this way. So whether I loved my school or took turn to resenting it or resented my neighborhood, these were still both of my worlds. And both worlds gave me two different definitions of manhood. One world said manhood is your extracurriculars, your being well balanced, your contacts, your academics, whereas the street says, hey, you can have all of those things, but if you're a soft punk, it means absolutely nothing. So with two different definitions of manhood, it led me to work hard because I needed to be both. I wanted to be a doctor because my friends, when I'd go to their homes and a helicopter's coming over their backyard, hey, what's the helicopter? Oh, my backyard's in Better Homes and Garden today. You just happen to be here. Oh, what's your dad do for a living? Oh, he's a doctor. At a young age, I said, well, I'm going to be a physician, and I'm going to work hard so I won't have to struggle this way. My mom worked so hard, and my dad worked so hard, but I wanted to live in a different way, And each generation is supposed to get better. My mom and dad taught me that. So I said, I'm going to pursue being a doctor. And my mom always told me, you're going to go to Princeton, Yale, or an Ivy League school. From a young age, she drilled that into my head. But I said in the book, I don't want to just be Cliff Huxtable, like on The Cosby Show. I want to be Miles Davis, too. So I wanted a Miles Davis swag, but a Cliff Huxtable, academic resume.
Right.
So I made a decision at 18, two of the biggest decisions of my life. I got into the University of Pennsylvania, so I'm heading to an Ivy League school as a pre-med student. But if the best university per se would help me on that track, what would help me become this tough guy that I felt I needed to be a man? So I took a job as a janitor, working the night shift with all ex-offenders on work release, scrubbing the streets of New York City in the worst era of the streets of New York at the Port Authority bus terminal, largest bus station in the country, and the depot of every crack addict, every homeless person, every pimp, every prostitute. And I immersed myself in this world and said, it's either going to kill me or it's going to make me into the man. And it's really a story of how far will all of us go for that summum bonum. We're wired to find the Lord. But until then, we're looking for what's the greatest good. And it really is a story of every one of us can relate. We all have that. We're chasing that thing. And if we don't know the Lord, we're chasing something to be devoted to it and make an idol out of it. And everything hinges on it. And we will go far. People will look for love in the wrong places. Everyone can relate to that. People will walk the tightrope. They will play with fire. Everyone. And that's something that's across all boards, whether it's the person in the 1% that's just cheating on the taxes and an illegal trade because they're going after their summum bonum. So this story is really a story that everyone can relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the New York City chapter is absolutely, it's just so gripping. I mean, you remember after I read it, I wanted to know about everybody in that story. Like, okay, who's this guy? And tell me about this. And what happened to them? You just get sucked into the story. But, I think of New York now, recently, obviously, New York's kind of fallen on some hard times because of COVID and all the lockdowns and all the crazy stuff that's gone on and protest and, the mayor and the governor of the state and, all of that. So New York's not what it was 10 years ago, even as far as, a place where you want to just go hang out.
Right.
And, but it's still a far cry from what it was when you were there. So, how many TV shows, Marvel. I mean, how many people have heard of Hell's Kitchen? Hell's Kitchen is kind of like a common reference nowadays, especially in TV shows. But Hell's Kitchen was Hell's Kitchen.
Was the neighborhood I was in.
Yeah.
Where I was a street
and
sweeper.
it was appropriately named. Correct.
It was Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
So this is before Giuliani cleaned up New York. This was pre-Giuliani. And this is when it was the big rotten apple where you saw the unimaginable, the indescribable, and I'm in this world. And very much like a modern Ecclesiastes, what happens when you succeed, and you actually attain what you're going after? I did well at UPenn as a pre-med student, and I got adopted by one of the head loan sharks in that whole part of Manhattan as his son. So now I'm like the son of the biggest loan shark. And he begins teaching me not just the streets, but begins teaching me to navigate the most vicious streets. And it's a story.
And they knew you were going to UPenn.
And loved it.
Okay.
And were for me. They didn't want, but they also, this is manhood. This is life as a hustle. Everyone should have a hustle. And it's that they're passing their wisdom down. But loved the fact that I was off in college, would get on me if they felt I was it gets in the book when my life begins getting dark. I'm like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but the two worlds begin colliding. They were the first ones to pull me aside. Hey, and it's funny, they didn't tell me stop hustling, but they said, keep your grades up, don't drop out of college, But what happens when you succeed in both worlds and you're still empty? Like Solomon in Ecclesiastes, when you attain the hedonistic pleasures and the moralistic human, but you're still empty.
Yeah.
And then that's where the book gets. But there's a lot of pimps you're going to meet. And it humanizes people. You're going to fall in love with crack addicts in this book. You're going to fall in love with atheistic professors. You're going to see yourself in different people. You're going to fall in love with the loan sharks. You're going to just see all of us are fallen creatures in the image of God, all going through the same struggle in a fallen world. So you're going to identify with different people. So it really, that's why the ground is level at the cross. When you really look at people, you realize we have more in common than we don't have in common. We're all,
Yeah, and I really think that that message. I feel like the Lord is reviving that message in the church. I feel like there was a long period of time where it was almost like in the church we sort of looked outside at the people you just described, and we looked at them as they're the enemy. They're the people that you want to make sure they get put behind bars. They're the people that you want to keep as far away from civilized people as you can. They're the people that you might hear once in a while some radical conversion story, but that was like 1 in a million. But for the most part, we saw those people as they're just a threat to basically the good life. They're a threat to our comfort. And yet the truth of the matter is they're, along with all the rest of us, they're the very people that Jesus died for. They're the very people that Jesus came to save. And if we look at them missionally, in the sense that we recognize that, like you said, Aaron, these are people created in God's image. These are people who are held captive by the devil. That's who I am. That's where I was at one time. Might not have been the exact same circumstances, but that's where I was. If I understand that, my mentality toward them is going to be a world of difference.
Definitely.
It's going to make a world of difference.
Well said.
And you're going to, you're either going to be like a culture warrior trying to beat back all the evils in the culture that you see, or you're going to be a missionary. You're on a mission for God to pull people out of these pits that they've, been ensnared in. And man, I thank God that he pulled you out of that pit. And he's used you to pull many others out. So, but I want to, before we go to the break, we're getting pretty close, so we might have to break in the middle of this. But let's talk a little bit about, so you had your education on the streets, and then back at UPenn, so you go in, you're a academically oriented guy, you're doing great, you're advancing in your courses, you're given kind of special place in the lab and all of this sort of stuff. But then the drugs and all of that are kind of starting to bring you down. But then there's also this spiritual thing that starts to really, eat at you or whatever, where you're looking for spiritual truth, but you end up looking in mostly all the wrong places.
I went through 7 different worldviews before I came to Christ.
Whoa.
And raised Catholic, went to church once a year, tried to pretend I had a fever, but I had to go anyway. You know how that is as a kid, just a knucklehead kid. But yeah, I went through 7 different worldviews, even the occult, and ended up finding truth in the very Christ I hated. I would rip out Bible pages and roll joints with them. That's how I ended a night of studying for a physics exam.
Oh my goodness.
I would persecute believers. I was looking and groping, and so.
Yeah, and most Christians would have looked at you and thought, this guy's hopeless.
Yeah.
There's no chance ever that anything's going to change.
Which is what made me hate Christians even more, because I could feel that I was being looked at by them, and I could perceive that, and it would just make me say all the more, that's why I won't ever come to you.
The same way the teachers looked at the kids cutting through the schoolyard.
100%.
There's that same kind of...
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
you could feel it. So non-believers, they don't have the Holy Spirit, but they have perception. And they know when they're being looked down the nose at and being looked at through the eyes of religion, and not the compassion of Jesus.
So we're going to go to break in a second, but I want to dig a little bit deeper too into the whole your immersion in African American studies and how you kind of just went deeper and deeper into trying to kind of find your identity.
Native mysticism, definitely. African American studies for sure.
Yeah, so because that's all fascinating stuff too. So there's a lot more.
Yes.
To talk about.
Yes, there is. And I hope we can do it all in half an hour. If not, Aaron is going to come back tomorrow. But tomorrow we're going to answer your questions. So what I suggest you do is today go on Amazon, purchase the book as a paperback or a hardback. Now, it probably won't arrive by tomorrow. Then again, Amazon, They have trucks everywhere, so you might get your copy tonight. But if you get the ebook or the audiobook, you can start reading that or listening to it and then call us tomorrow with your questions. I'll tell you more about the book and our guest when we come back in a moment here on Pastor's Perspective.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues. And now, here's today's host, Brian Perez.
Yes, we are back on Pastor's Perspective, and we're not taking any calls this hour, but today's Thursday, so we will be doing a second hour of the program, and during that hour, we will be taking your questions. So let me give you the number now so that you have it handy, 888-564-6173. This hour, we are talking to our friend Aaron Campbell. He's a pastor in Philadelphia. He's written this book called Eyes That Seen Plenty. You can find it on Amazon as a paperback or a hardback or an ebook or an audiobook. The audiobook, by the way, was recorded in our studios. So check that out on Amazon. Again, it's called Eyes That Seen Plenty. There are two different versions. You want to get the updated and expanded version of the book because there's a lot more in it. He rewrote it 2020? Is that when you started?
Yes.
Yeah, putting the additions to it. I see on the back of the book, Brian was mentioning the pictures on the back of the book. I also see that you have an endorsement from one of the founding fathers of hip-hop, Curtis Blow. Curtis Blow, my goodness. Are you in what's he doing these days? Is he following the Lord? What's he up to?
He is.
Oh,
loves the Lord, does a lot of evangelical work here in California.
Wow.
Was pastoring at one point, still may be pastoring.
Okay.
But yeah, my childhood icon. I mean, he was as big as Michael Jackson if you were in the hip hop scene. And he read the book, loved it, I was just so humbled to get the endorsement from him.
Yeah.
So we stay in touch now every now and then. Awesome guy, him and his wife.
Did you know that name?
Yes. I mean, I wasn't big into the hip-hop scene, but that name, I mean, that's just one of those names that,
Yeah, I missed that part of culture. I wasn't quite there for.
We can get you in it really easy. Spotify, just do a search.
And if you YouTube Soul Train, he was there. When he was on Soul Train, everyone made sure the aluminum foil on their TV antennas was just right.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Aaron, let's dive back in and let's talk about your so, you're studying your pre-med, all that, but then you also start really digging into African-American studies. You start digging into Native American mysticism. Tell us kind of what led you there and where that led you.
Okay, so it's my junior year now. I'm working for one of the top melanoma scientists in the world, Dr. Maynard Herlin at Wistar Institute, which is second only to NIH. So my path is what people are saying is you're set for life, because they're saying his recommendations alone will set you. And interestingly, I have the recommendation he wrote for me in the book. I printed it in there just to see, yes, this is where I'm headed. But I was looking for education to be my salvation. I was looking for this success to bring healing. The Bible gets into sexual abuse when I'm a kid, a lot of things. It's a very vulnerable story of inner turmoil. So even while seeming so happy and carefree on the outside, on the inside, the Bible says the heart knows its own bitterness. I was looking for the streets to give me some healing, and now I'm accepted. I'm the son of a big loan shark. I'm a hustler. I'm running with gangsters. I'm a criminal. I'm good at what I'm doing. Why am I still empty? Where was that salvation? Where was that satisfaction? Now I'm hanging with well-known rappers, and I'm noticing they're as insecure as me, and I'm noticing we're all messed up.
Yeah.
Then at the University of Pennsylvania, the healing wasn't coming in, and I really just felt like I was lied to. I felt like life, the answer will not come from the material. So I began a spiritual search. But being so anti-Christian, the Bible was the last place I wanted to look. So I went on a journey. So now instead of studying for organic chemistry, I'm under a tree on campus getting high, and I'm reading Siddhartha. I'm getting deep into Buddhism. And the book's not written from the perspective of where I'm giving a Christian lecture over my shoulder. You're going to feel and walk with me through wherever I'm at. You're going to get where I am. So when I'm journeying through Buddhism and I find that the circle of life and the lack of an explanation for the evil and suffering in my life, what I feel doesn't suffice, the reader will relate. When I then get into Medu Neter and ancient Egyptology and their version of the afterlife. So I'm literally studying each of these 7 worldviews, and it's in the book. So the book is very much an apologetic book. There's an imam that gave his life to Christ after reading the book. Some high-level Hindus have given their lives to the Lord. Wow. People in the Philadelphia prison system, atheists, people from all different walks, because it's walking you through all of these different worldviews, and then it ends at the cross when God literally stepped in. It wasn't me finding him, it was him finding me.
Okay, so when you guys buy this book on Amazon, don't just buy one, buy like 10 and have them on standby ready to hand out to people. You never know who you might meet. And you might say, hey, I think you need to read this book. It's called Eyes That Seen Plenty by Pastor Aaron Campbell.
Yeah, so take us on the journey to meeting Jesus.
Okay, so walking through these 7 different worldviews, and I mean the worldviews of everyone from man originated from the mud of the Nile River, and I'm into the Egyptian hieroglyphics, to native mysticism and vision quests and omens and the Great Spirit, which is really animism, mostly. I had this dream that I'm in the middle of campus, in the middle of this life, and really I just wanted to get locked up. I actually would tell my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I just want to get locked up. And I was doing enough crimes for it to happen. I wanted to find peace so badly, and I felt that it was not going to be found in success nor in doing dirt and living in the fast lane, that I felt being in a jail cell for 23 hours a day would give me the quiet I needed, because I knew truth was out there. I just wanted time to be left alone and to find it. And so sad, at 22 years old, I thought a jail cell would be the perfect place. Majority of my childhood friends were doing jail time at that point for being drug dealers, some big drug dealers in my neighborhood, my childhood best friends. So the book gets into that. And basically, I had an uncle. I had this dream that I was being yanked out of quicksand in the cornfields of North Carolina. And that's where my native family is from. But I hadn't been there since I was 15. I thought I'm a city boy. That's my country family. I'll see them when I see them. I might miss something if I go to the country. Too much is happening in the city. I had a dream that I was being pulled out of quicksand. I took it as an omen because I was big into New Age by then, big New Ager, and tarot card user. So the tarot cards didn't tell me that it was a bad idea. The New Age omen seemed like it was the right thing to do. And look how Jesus steps into, just like the Magi. They're in the middle of, they're fire worshipers, and he shows them a star. And they find Jesus. He stepped into my mess. I go down there, I see an uncle who had a transformed life. He opens the Bible, and it's like cutting open a loaf of warm bread. I never saw anyone handle a Bible like him, but I was a science major. So I had already gotten goosebumps from seances. I'd already gotten, when I tried necromancy, I already had emotional experiences. I needed to see truth. And what he did is he showed me Bible prophecy. He took me to the book of Daniel, and I needed to see that. And I knew my ancient history. And when he showed me Bible prophecy, I mean for a week's time, and he knew his word. He was a truck driver, my Uncle Greg. He just read the word. And when I was little, he was a bad dude. So seeing him saved, because he was the one that when he came to the family cookouts, my parents made us go home, because when he came, the party got crazy. Now he's a different man. He had this peace that I wanted. It's like being at a restaurant. You see someone over there eating a meal. You say to the server, whatever they're eating, I want it. He had something. He talked about Jesus like his best friend. Now, Bible prophecy doesn't save anyone, but when he showed me Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon in the scriptures, the Medo-Persians, Alexander the Great and the Greeks, even what we're seeing now with everything heading in a Roman Empire in the end times, because I knew something bad was coming too. Because people in the world know, people know that something bad is coming. People are studying their conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I was paralyzed with fear with that stuff. And a lot of people in the world are. He showed me most of all that the Bible tells the end of the story, that Jesus wins, and that the Bible is supernatural by Bible prophecy. Now, that doesn't save a person. I was then ready to hear the gospel, though. And when he gave me the gospel, I was not ready to hear it. But I never had heard the gospel. I was 22 and thought I knew the gospel. I was raised Catholic. Of course I knew the gospel. When he told me that Jesus died for me, not for just mankind, me, that when I hurt, he hurt, that he would take everything, and he was a redeemer. He would redeem my life, my soul. He would redeem my scars. He would redeem the ugliest things I've been through. He would take lemons and make lemonade. But first he would take me and save me. Resurrect me from the dead, from spiritual death. Yeah, and I had a radical conversion, and that was it. And it sent shockwaves, because a lot of people, I was such a hustler. A lot of people thought, I got to see him because he's probably pretending to be saved because he's going to rob a church. Like literally, people really, he's up to something. This is a new hustle. But then people would see me, praise God, and they would say, it's real. So.
Wow, I love it. Yeah, that's amazing. So, okay, so we talked at the very beginning about the original, so you came to faith, you started growing in your faith, you got discipled. Just touch on that for just a minute or two. Just, where did you go from, you're a new believer, you're still at school, correct, at the time?
Yes.
You're still at school?
I had 1 year left.
Yeah, and Tasha, where's Tasha at this time? Tasha is Aaron's wife.
Right. So at this point, when I was radically saved, she had 1 year of law school left. She went to UPenn with me, but she was 2 years ahead of me. So she went off to Georgetown Law School while I was there. And we were a Bonnie and Clyde thing. Now, of course, my wife being an attorney and everything, I don't tell her story. It's my story. I have to be careful. She's like, hey, I'm a lawyer now. Okay, sweetheart, no problem. But she's in the story as well. And I went to a number of different churches, experienced even what it's like to be saved and be hurt by the church, because I wasn't churchy. I went to churches of other denominations, other movements, and I just loved Jesus, but I didn't fit in with culture, and church can have its own blind spot of culture. Churches that were old wineskins, they didn't want to make room for a young guy who was just pumped and wanted to go into the world that I just got saved out of, that I should have burned in. So after some pain and seeing some different things, God was just permitting me to see it. Yeah. And even then I felt that God, you're allowing me, I was church hopping, but not just different Pentecostal churches. I mean Pentecostal, Presbyterian, Baptist. He was really showing me his bride. And no matter what, it's his bride. We have issues to work out, but we are his bride. But we do have a lot of issues we have to work out. We're the best dysfunctional family on the planet, but we are a dysfunctional family. And then I found the Calvary Chapel movement. And Why Grace Changes Everything by Chuck Smith.
Yes.
And verse by verse teaching, where even the teaching of a genealogy has you just feeling like personal revival is hitting you. And got discipled in the Calvary Chapel movement, became a Calvary Chapel pastor followed Chuck's teaching. You know, what if God is guiding, God will provide. The reliance on the Holy Spirit, the freedom. That was the thing, freedom. And a grace, but not a grace that's licensed, a grace that is so awesome, it just makes you want to pursue the Lord, but grace. And then not forgetting the rock you're hewn from, you know.
So we're 20 years down the road from that original starting a Bible study in your house. You showed me that house when we were driving around Philly, the house that you guys got started in. And so let's fast forward to today, and let's talk a little bit about the church over the past, few years. But there's something that I know is burning on your heart, and it's the Level Up outreach that you've been engaged in for a couple years now. And so Aaron and I were, we just got together just now before the radio program. So he just showed me a picture of a young guy that I met when I was in Philly that I just had an immediate connection with, who at the time was one of the young guys coming and dancing and hanging out, a tough kid from the streets, Muslim background. And Aaron just told me that he got baptized on Easter. So God's doing some really extraordinary stuff. So just walk us through a little bit of the history before Level Up, and then let's go to Level Up.
Sure. So just in the same way God miraculously provided for us to buy a 12,000 square foot building on one of the main arteries of the city. We're on Chestnut Street. So to know Philly is to know Market Street, and Chestnut Street's the second name you'll say. That was a miraculous provision some 10 plus years ago. So we have this 12,000 square foot building, and about 4 years ago, we had a roof collapse. We had inherited an issue. We knew it would be an issue, but University City was the first gentrified city really in America. So for us to even have that building and it's zoned to be a hotel, it can go up into the sky. We still get phone calls to this day, people trying to offer us a couple $1 million for the building because everyone wants it. However, we knew we inherited a problem. We knew the problem would need to be addressed. We had a roof collapsing. God provided once again miraculously for us to fix the roof. But while the roof was a portion was completely taken off, God gave us a vision, and I said, we're going to knock all the walls out of our building. We're going to, instead of it being 12 rooms, we're going to knock all the walls out, eliminate a hallway. We're going to create an open space, put new double doors into our lot, and we're going to bring the streets into our church. And we began a movement reaching out to the at-risk teens and young adults in Philly. Philadelphia has more incarcerated teenagers than anywhere in the country, more teenagers doing life than anywhere in the country. We're 5 times smaller than New York, but we're only the murder capital behind Chicago.
Teenagers doing life.
More than anywhere in
Teenagers
the country. Yeah.
doing life. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, so we're only behind Chicago in murders, and it is a very violent city. Youth are misdirected. They're charged, but they want help. They want mentoring. They want a father, a godfather, and uncle. So we invited them in, and I'll tell you, people said we were crazy. People accused us of not being gospel-minded. And interestingly, Jesus said, "Suffer the children to come." You'd expect people to say, "Oh, this is the literal teachings of Jesus."
Yeah.
But this is what churchianity can do, and it can happen to me too. All of us have to be so watchful against churchianity. We bring them in, and no, we didn't bring them in to make them all take a seat and, hey, you sit down and here's your catechism and you're going to memorize the Westminster Confession of Faith. And well, what is that? Never mind, just read it. No, we brought them in and we met them at their level, the same way Chuck did with the hippies, and we valued them. And then we entered into their culture to become all things to all men, but then to bring the countercultural message of the cross. And so we created once a month a club night where they would come and just do dance battles. Instead of fighting on the streets and shooting each other, they would come and do these dance battles. But it turned into the largest movement in the region from North Jersey to Baltimore. We were getting some 300 plus teens and young adults from all over. We were reconciling some of the biggest gang disputes in the city that would have turned very bloody. They were coming from all over. And for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, we just give them the gospel, then go right back to the evening. and we watch the Holy Spirit do we can't save a soul, but the Holy Spirit does. And when we just when we give glory to the Lord, the Holy Spirit does it. And it's level up. Then once they come to our event, it turns into academic tutoring. It turns into court advocacy, life skills, family dinners every Thursday night. So it's become a family now for 2 years. And when Brian came, they just fell in love with you, you know.
Yeah, I was like the old person in the group. So, yeah, I think the only really gray-haired person around. But Aaron, talk a little bit about some of the kids, about their backgrounds, about the towers there in West Philly, the project that a lot of these kids live in. And, these kids, even when I was there, there were some interesting moments. The one guy that came in with the motorcycle helmet on and left it on the whole time, that guy.
Definitely.
And,
green-haired Dave.
Yeah, and
Joker.
But these kids are, kids, some of they are kids, but then some of them are a bit older. But, these are kids who are potential violent lifers in prison. That's kind of the trajectory that many of them are on, but then they're coming. And I think the approach that you guys have that's just so amazing is you're kind of just drenching them in love and in kindness, and that's slowly but surely melting the hardness of the hearts.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we put 4 80-inch screen televisions around this large open space. There's video games, arcade, pool table, ping pong, basketball shooting. We have a family meal. They know now that when the food arrives, we all pray. And it's so much so that if I'm not in the room or one of the leaders, they wait. They know that we pray as a family. Family is very important to them. But so some come because they're scared of the streets. Some come because they're scared of what they'll do to someone if they stay on the streets. Some have already been called the heir of some of the biggest drug corners, the only 17-year-old that's allowed to sell drugs here. So a lot of them, let's just say when we part ways, I just look at many of them and it's saying, I hug them when I leave because it's so violent right now that just you hope that we're going to all be at the table the next week. Mm-hmm. And they feel the same way. In Philadelphia, when you say to someone, be safe out there, you literally are saying I want to see you next week. Mm-hmm. It's not just a cliche, be safe. It is that precarious there. But God is doing a work, and now we're seeing a number of them. We've seen trickles of them getting saved, but Razan gave his life to the Lord Easter Sunday. Wow. So we're seeing them, and they're getting baptized under the subway right behind our church. And the West Park housing projects are the biggest, roughest housing projects in the city. They're right behind our church, and this is where the majority of them are coming from. And this is just, they call it home. And we don't make church mandatory, but they do come on Sundays. But these are kids who are waking themselves up. No mom to threaten to take their iPhone. No one saying get to church. So when they do come, we celebrate it because they're getting up at 9 a.m., taking one token, and they're riding a train to come to church. And parents know they're there, but they're coming without parents, you know. But it is spreading. Our assistant pastor went to buy paint the other day on the other side of the city. And he said, she read, Antioch, are you Level Up? She said, my kids come and dance there. She said, we love what you're doing. And just basically cut them this discount, and I'm coming to your church now. So we do see moms and dads come in just to shake our hand. Some dads come home from prison. The first place they want to come is shake our hand and say, thanks for watching my daughter while I've been away these years. So so we're excited. We're making a movie about it. Please pray, a documentary. So that should be ready, in a handful of months. But the documentary will be out.
About your book or about Level Up?
About Level Up.
Because I was going to say your book can be a movie as well.
Well, thank you for
Brian
that
knows
compliment.
people. I know people. We can make this happen.
well, that is the prayer as well. That is the prayer as well for sure.
Awesome.
So
yeah, there's so many amazing stories out there that could be made into fantastic films, and yours is absolutely one of them for sure. So tomorrow Aaron's going to be back on with us tomorrow. And tomorrow we're just going to spend our time with our audience engaging. We're going to do, question answer time like we normally do on our daily program. But I want to encourage those of you who are listening today to call back tomorrow And not just with a random Bible question, but let's try to have a conversation around these kinds of things that Aaron's talking about, because I think, the hope, the only hope for the world, the only hope for our nation, the only hope for Philadelphia, the only hope for Southern California is the gospel, really, truly. And I think one of the wonderful things is the story is inspiring to see how God is at work, even in the darkest places, even in the places where, a lot of people are just not going to go there because why would you go there? But God has sent you there providentially, and he's using you among this group of people that he absolutely loves, but they need to be reached in a particular way. And God's given you guys kind of the key, to how to reach these kids. And I think that just talking about that, just sharing ideas and vision and hope, because we want to see this happen all over the place.
Yeah. So aside from buying 10 copies of your book, Eyes That Seen Plenty, you can find that on Amazon by Aaron Campbell, our guest today on Pastor's Perspective. How can people help out? I mean, they've heard what you do in Philadelphia. Maybe somebody listening is from Philadelphia and they love that you're doing this in their old stomping grounds. What can they do to help you guys out or whatever?
You can send an email, of course, to info@antiochphilly.org. So our church is Antioch, so it's ANTIOCH, Philly.org. You can like our Facebook page, Antioch Christian Fellowship Facebook page. And then I would just say as well, when this book was written, this was written with tears, with a lot of prayer, so that people can fall back in love with their own testimony and also fall back in love with he that winneth souls is wise. The book is written to lead someone to Christ. So I would just encourage people to get the book, give it to that person that maybe you get tongue twisted with, but you can hand them a gift, hand them a book, and then just pray, So I would just encourage people, and it's so important to me that when I see people, I don't have the money, I'll give it to them right off the back of my Jeep, because we're trying to build one kingdom here,
Yeah.
But I would say, as an evangelistic thing, and also just for discussions on race, class, and culture in the context of the gospel, that's here as well. So just get the book and enjoy it, and praise God and thank you.
Awesome. Again, the book is called Eyes That Seen Plenty by Aaron Campbell. You can find it on Amazon. Join us tomorrow. Aaron's going to be back in the studio tomorrow, but tomorrow we'll open up the phone line so that you can call in and ask your questions. Now, today's Thursday, which means we're here for 2 hours today. We're going to open up the phone lines now to take your calls for the program that is going to be on the radio on Monday. So give us a call, 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway will be joining us, and so will Ben Corson. Ben's on his way in, so we'll have Ben on the program as well. Good night. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.